Alright, I missed a few of these, so I really want to catch up with what I've missed. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to do another, if not another one after that. Just keep going until I can't go anymore, in all honesty. I really want to get back into the swing of this, but I missed a good few, so I gotta catch up. Gotta play some catch up. Without further ado, the words for this improv 5-word story are spirit, trip, chair, vague, and indirect. I give my brain about 3 seconds to process whatever that means. And here we go. The old ghost hunter found his cage rattling as the horses dragged it behind him on the carriage. Not made of steel, but made of glass and runes most people couldn't recognize. He took one raspy breath. In his old age, even his clothes reflected the experiences he'd had. He wore tattered leather, in the weakest of forms, thin and frail, just like himself. At his old age, his matted, wet, sweaty hair stuck and clung to the back of his neck in thin, long strands. One would wonder if the man could even see under all that hair. But he made his way around just fine. The clothes he wore were reflective. I already did that. The clothes he wore were just as thin as his hair, draping over him barely, but were enough to call a coat, pants, and a pair of shoes. His only saving grace was what he was currently sitting on to remain comfortable, a long leather overcoat that clicked on his heels with the mud that had gathered over the past few travels whenever he walked. He was on his way to a specific call up in a very, very small village where people had begun to panic. Movement during the night, sounds, a lot of them were natural, but every once in a while it was unnatural enough for him to get paid, and this was one of those scenarios. Recently, a fellow not much older than him had passed away in his home. Luckily, not to savagery, but just as old age takes those who come before us. The only issue is, they still hear him, rocking in his chair, in the middle of the night, where he used to sit up and study the moon and study the stars. The old astronomer passed away, but nobody thought he was truly gone. People weren't worried that something ill would happen, that perhaps this man held a grudge from his past life, but there were those who wanted him to be able to rest. Family members, friends, neighbors, that were worried that the spirit wouldn't be able to move on. And thus, our old ghost hunter had been called to the task, to find the man who had ceased to be. Clicking rocks off the side of the gravel road, he rolled right into the center of town, parked his carriage, reined his horses, and walked up to the first person he saw. "This be the town of Ornum, yes?" he said, to the nearest person. Yes, this is the town of Ornum. Are you perhaps the old ghost hunter?" "Just ghost hunter is fine, but yes, I am a ghost hunter." The man, taken aback, looked at him and said, "Yes, of course. Right up this way. The man lived up on the hill, best place to view the stars." And the old ghost hunter followed him, up a few sets of stairs, to a house, perched, creaking, on the top of a very silent hill, devoid of trees, devoid of anything blocking the stars. As the ghost hunter got closer, he didn't witness anything immediately right off the bat that tipped him off that he would have to perform some sort of exorcism, banishment, or ritual. Instead, he saw a comforting home right under the stars that he himself thought about possibly taking up. But the man before him said, "This is the home. This is where we keep hearing noises, keep seeing things. It's as though he never left. It's not that we think he'll hurt us. We just want him to be at peace. The old ghost hunter said, Yeah, no, I understand. Whatever, you can go now. And the young man was taken aback, but made his way back down the hill. And as he left, he said, I'll be sure to fetch up the coin that we owe you. And the ghost hunter said, Yeah. Okay, sorry about that, got a phone call. Stuff like that can happen, I suppose, when I don't mute my phone. The old ghost hunter shooed the man away, and then approached the creaky old house. He let one hand rest on the bronze knob, turned it slightly. It was always weird entering these old spaces, knowing that there's still a presence here. No one could accept his knock, so he didn't bother. He opened the door, and the entire doorway let out a mournful groan. Sad that it had been this long since it had been entered once more. He stepped into the house, dark and dreary, lit his lantern, raised it above his head, and closed the door behind him. The firelight revealed something all too familiar in his line of work. Papers, dishes, an entire home and lifestyle, waiting, patiently, as though someone would return back to it. That was always difficult in this line of work, far more difficult when he started. But it seemed like someone would always come back. It seemed like someone's lifestyle had paused in vain. But instead, it was now a mess someone else had to clean up. And that was his job. He roamed around the house, careful to get an idea of who this person was. Took a look at the star charts, the maps, the constellations that he had drawn, written, passed out amongst the entirety of the ceiling. He raised one solid hand with his lantern. That was garbage. He raised his lantern skyward and saw not just the stars themselves, but every pattern the man had ever seen in them. Every single speck, every single light. He had given a name. He had given a personality, almost. His notes, stacked thick, still laying out on the table in 4 different piles. The old ghost hunter laughed to himself. This was truly a man who loved his work as much as he did. And he heard a small rocking noise from out on the front porch, and he thought, there you are. He stepped back out on the porch to see the chair still rocking, and see the telescope in front of it move slightly. So you are still here. You must be moving along. You're starting to worry folk. The chair continued to rock, but the telescope moved no more. With one solid rock backwards, the chair seemed to fall back into a resting position. Not possible for something that should return back to center at the end of every single movement. Hey, I understand it can be hard. I have rituals. I have exorcisms. I have cages for the unruly ones, but for folks like you, for people who worked this hard, and were probably close to something even bigger, I have for you words. If you'll listen. The rocking chair didn't move. It stayed where it was. He didn't know if he wanted to listen or not, if he was tied to the chair somehow. But either way, he had a captive audience. He sat down on a small bench on the other side of the house, careful to keep his distance. It was a line of work he was familiar with, but he knew comfort only grew the possibility of mishap. He kept his distance, but kept a warm and friendly tone. In my line of work, I see a lot of this. People who don't want to let go. People who still have just a little bit more to do. But the truth of the matter is, I too am one of those people. Look at me. I grow old and weary, and I hope I can take my own advice when the time comes. But I have only few words for you. You've lived your life. It is time to move on. If you're to stay, for everything that you ever wanted to do, the list will always grow, and you'll be here forever. That is not a fate worth dying for. No, You deserve the peace of moving onwards. It's okay to accept that not every star in the sky will have a name. No, you should leave that to those who come after you. It is not your burden to bear the entire weight of the world upon your own arms. Whether you love your work or not, it is time to let go and let the new creep in. I'm going to light 2 sticks now. They are each of an essence that will help you to pass forward. I recommend doing something you enjoy and letting the light take you. Lighting 2 incense, the old ghost chaser set them on the ground and rocked back and forth in the bench and listened as the rocking chair moved. The telescope twitched, pointed towards the sky, and slowly the rocking chair stopped, laid in a resting motion, and the telescope fell back. I hope you're at peace. Well, time for the money. The ghost hunter stood up and started heading back down the hill. They're not usually this quick, but it's easier with those who pass of old age. He was starting to get up to that age as well, to feel the brick, the stone, the metal of the gate that he'd have to pass through. It was almost as though he could touch it himself now. When he slept, just a few hours too much. For every last little bit of extra rest he needed, he felt as though he could reach out and touch that gate, and he hoped that one day, when he was gone, someone would pick up the mantle to do what he's doing now, to help him along